The 1803 Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States, adding the massive territory at the mere price of 3 cents per acre. But did you know that the arrangement sparked a sectional secession movement and constitutional crisis? With the rising importance of navigation on the Mississippi River, the addition of New Orleans became a compelling prospect for U.S. President Thomas Jefferson. He sent two of his ablest diplomats, James Monroe and Robert Livingston, to France in an attempt to secure a deal with Napoleon. To their surprise, not only was Napoleon willing to part with New Orleans, he offered the entire Louisiana territory to the United States for $15 million. It was a giant swath of land that included 15 present U.S. states, stretching northward beyond the modern Canadian border. Monroe and Livingston thought the United States should agree to the deal immediately, but communicated word to Jefferson and awaited further instructions. After receiving word of the proposition, Jefferson was reluctant to agree to the deal despite his clear desire to acquire the territory. According to the president, the United States could not constitutionally acquire the territory unless a constitutional amendment allowed for it. Those in Jefferson's cabinet, several of whom wrote letters in support of the purchase, vehemently disagreed with the president. The purchase, they said, was permitted under the treaty-making power. Nevertheless, Jefferson sent a proposed U.S. amendment to Congress for consideration. If it was ratified by the requisite number of states, he would gladly agree to the deal. However, Secretary of State James Madison warned Jefferson that a delayed response to Napoleon could lead him to revoke the unprecedented offer, since Napoleon required quick payment to fund his war with England. A constitutional amendment, Madison thought, was too time-consuming and unnecessary. In the end, Jefferson agreed to put his approval on the Louisiana Purchase, still doubting the constitutionality of the acquisition, but deferring to the advice of his cabinet and realizing the historical importance of the transaction. The treaty with France was then sent to the Senate for consideration. These circumstances caused a firestorm of controversy in New England, where some of the most prominent politicians lashed out against the arrangement. Hardly an isolated pack of rebels, many of them were directly involved in writing and ratifying the Constitution. Believing that the territory would diminish the relative power of New England and his state of Massachusetts, Senator Timothy Pickering even suggested that Massachusetts should secede from the Union if Louisiana was added as a territory. There will be a separation, he predicted. Aaron Burr professed that the northern states must be governed by Virginia or must govern Virginia, and there is no middle ground. Senator James Hillhouse of Connecticut joined the choir, declaring that the eastern states must and will dissolve the Union and form a separate government of their own, and the sooner they do it, the better. While the Louisiana Purchase ignited hostilities from New England, most of the Senate thought that the treaty was constitutional. The body agreed to ratify it by an overwhelming margin of 24-7, and the treaty took legal effect. Even so, was it constitutional? After all, the federal government often engaged in duplicitous behavior, even during the first Congress. To answer this question, one must take historical context regarding treaty power into account. When the Constitution was ratified in the 18th century, 4 types of treaties were prevalent: treaties of alliance, treaties of peace, treaties of commerce, and treaties of land purchase. Under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, the President has the power to make treaties with the advice and consent of the Senate. Exercising this power requires a threshold of 2/3 of the senators to put any treaty into legal effect. During the ratification campaign in the states, the treaty-making power was often described in broad terms that encompassed all types of treaties, but several Federalists implied that the same power, held in England by the King, would be divided in the United States between the President and Senate. Of course, treaties to obtain territory from foreign countries were well within the scope of this authority. Whatever one thinks of the constitutionality of the Louisiana Purchase, I strongly believe that Jefferson should be commended for being reluctant to embrace power that he deemed impermissible. Such an inclination, after all, is almost unheard of today. Doubling the size of the country for a mere 3 cents per acre, it is impossible to overstate the impact that the Louisiana Purchase had on the development of the country. By all accounts, it was one of the most monumental events in U.S. history. As Robert Livingston said, this is the noblest work of our whole lives. In my book, Compact of the Republic, I emphasized how the Jeffersonian vision for a decentralized republic was completely in accordance with the original intent of the Constitution. I've included a link to that below in the notes. In addition, I've also included links on the best works on the Louisiana Purchase. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos on history in a nutshell.